So the way the book is written, I'll be discussing a little bit about that, and and also I'll be going over insight number 9, a very a potent insight, really potent insight. So how the book's knowledge is, I designed it so that when you read the insights, only the insights, you will, it's like an instruction manual, so that when you read the insights, you will be gradually introduced to the subject matter, the background information, the subject matter itself, and be guided even by method of explanation within the insights themselves, how all this knowledge really works together. So some of the insights are explanatory, like this one. Insight number 9. It's somewhat lengthy because of its explanatory nature. Hold on to your seats. Okay. Because of its potent information coming to you. So, I'm going to read it first, then I'm going to go through explaining it. The mind, gripped by pleasure. The mind gripped by pleasure alters one's sense of reality. Pleasure becomes one of the overwhelming priorities. People, places, and items will have a new, altered meaning in accordance to their ability to hinder, enhance, or have no effect on pleasure. A person might be seen as a potential sex partner, a table as a place to have sex on, food as a way to add flavor to sexual episodes. Anything that does not relate to pleasure might have no meaning in this altered state. For example, a person's status and relation might be overlooked or forgotten. It is also possible for relation and status to be used to enhance the mental excitement because of the oddity, intrigue, or danger that is created by the situation. Okay, so the mind gripped by pleasure. How is the mind gripped by pleasure? Does pleasure come and grab the mind? Pleasure itself is not a being, so how can it be coming after to grab the mind? No. In actuality, it's the mind of the individual that is grabbing onto pleasure. How? Because of its focus, It's attention. Intense attention. You see the focus. Focus is attention with intensity, an intense attention. So the mind grabs on to something. Why and how? Because the mind is attending. Its attention is on something quite strongly. That means focus. The mind is thus focused. The mind is focused quite strongly. It's fixated strongly on pleasure. That is how the mind is gripped. It is the mind that is actually doing the gripping, grabbing hold onto pleasure. So, the mind gripped by pleasure, we understand what that means now. So the mind being focused intensely on pleasure alters one's sense of reality. So this situation that the mind gets into, which is focusing on pleasure, alters its sense of reality. As you know, your sense of reality, of what is real, is determined by your mind. Your mind perceives, oh, I'm sitting on a seat. There is ground beneath me. There is air above. There are people walking about. This, whatever it is your mind that perceives the reality. If you're in a video arcade place, you will become aware of it because your mind is focused and determines, hey, this is the state of the reality here. This is what's going on here. When the mind is focused on pleasure, because the focus is quite intense on pleasure, this affects the state of the reality of the mind. A simple example of that is like when if you're having a nice day and something troubles you, something disturbs you, and suddenly your whole mood of the day is ruined, and you feel like it's very bad, and the mood of the day is changed. You know, let's say you had an altercation with some person verbally or non-verbally, and so it messed up your mood, made you aware of how bad the world is. You know, it just makes it different. So that is a small example, but we're going to go into detail here. So this is how it occurs, how your mind shifts. This is, of course, talking about a situation where you are when you're in a state of arousal or quite intensely focused on sex, you may engage in behavior which is quite odd to you. In odd behavior, which is not normally part of your regular characteristic. Even by your own standards, you may behave quite oddly, and it may even shock yourself. You go, why am I doing that? What the heck's going on? I'm displaying behavior which is not me. You know, like that, you know. So this is what it's talking about. So pleasure becomes one of the overwhelming priorities. This is how it happens. Pleasure becomes one of the overwhelming priorities because of the intensity of the pleasure, because of the overwhelming nature of this pleasure on your mind. It supersedes, it takes over the mind, so that any other reality, any other concepts of reality that you have in your mind is overshadowed, is overtaken by this pleasure because it is so intense. An example of that is you're sitting in a park somewhere, suddenly there's a gunshot, and you're like, now suddenly you have forgotten everything why you're there. Um, so many things you just forget, and you just focused on the gunshot, where it came from, and who's doing what, and are you in danger, or is anybody else in danger? Depending on if you're trying to run away, you're thinking, how the heck am I going to get out of here, and what's going on? Now the reality has shifted. If there's a loose tiger, you suddenly spot a lion or a tiger loose in the park somewhere, and you're like, oh my God, immediately you try to figure out how you're going to escape this animal and get yourself out of harm's way and get into a building somewhere, and then you call somebody, you know. Or you might want to help others too. That's another thing. Yeah, so the reality of the situation, it's so overwhelming that you everything else takes a second. It is not as important as this reality that's just happening now. At that moment, you're not thinking of your bills or what you're gonna do for lunch. You know, no, you're just thinking you don't want to be at the lunch of the lion. Okay, so it's overwhelming. It becomes a priority because of this overwhelming nature. People, places, items, including, of course, we have situations, everything, emotions, you name it, everything. People, places, items, I mentioned in the book, but also it's everything actually, including situations, will all have a new. So people, places, and items will all have a new, altered meaning. So everything in the universe at that moment for you will have an altered meaning, different meaning, in accordance to their ability to hinder, enhance, or have no effect on pleasure. So they will have a new, altered meaning based on their relation to pleasure, based on their effect on your pleasure. So here by explanatory way, I explain a person might be seen as a potential sex partner. So, talking about people, so you see a person and you wonder, oh, this person you may because of your state of pleasure, any person you may see you see, oh, that could be a sexual partner. Are they appealing to you or not? You see. If you see an object, items, a table, you see a table as a place to have sex on. You see a table and you go, this, I can use this in my sexual episode in some sort of way. You say food. You see food as a way to add flavor to sexual episodes. You may interact with food and incorporate that into your reality, and at that moment your reality is pleasure. Anything that does not relate to pleasure might have no meaning in this altered state. So yeah, so if some things you might see, a squeezy rubber ducky you might see, and it has no meaning to you. To you at that moment, the rubber ducky is not a toy to have fun with, or video games. You might see a video game, at that moment, it's blah to you. It has no meaning in your dictionary. Video, you don't even think about it. There's no meaning. You're just thinking, what can add to this pleasure reality of mine? Yeah, so for example, a person's status and relation might be overlooked or forgotten. So you might, in this pleasureful state, have, the status of a person might have no relation to sex, your pleasure, might have no influence, so you don't care, you don't focus on it. It has no meaning to you, you're focusing on something else. It's also possible for the relation and status to be used to enhance the mental excitement. So, so you may see the the status of a person or their relationship with you. Like it could be a coworker or a family member. It could be a distant family member. It could be friends, whatever. And so they mentally enhance the so they mentally enhance the excitement because of its oddity, intrigue, or danger, and many other things, such as, like, if you've seen some Japanese cartoons that that some sexual episodes are shown. I've seen very few, briefly seen a little bit of that, and I became aware what they're using is, in the few examples that I saw, very few, didn't go much into that. They were using innocence, not having knowledge about this, or very little knowledge, or no knowledge. So complete innocence about this into feeling it. So sexual pleasure, including the idea of innocence, and then suddenly discovering it. Oh, it is pleasure. There you go. You see the difference, the contrast. So they're using the complete innocence, no knowledge of this, or very little knowledge, or no knowledge, and it's a mental state, not knowing, and then being exposed to it, and then and then feeling it and go, wow, this is so powerful. There you go. That's what's happening with there. Intrigue or danger that is created by the situation. So they're presenting that. So a lot of people are watching this stuff and they don't know exactly why they feel so drawn to the depiction of these characters, and wonder why are they so influenced. It's because of what I presented to you about the mental intrigue. Okay. About the prominent reality that is taking over the mind, the pleasure that is taking over the mind. It is not only, now speaking about life in general, I'm not just about sex, but not just talking about sex. So anything that overwhelms the mind, I would say most things that overwhelm the mind, thus altering one's sense of reality, it's not good, because it's an imbalanced view of life that you have at that moment. So it could be shopping, cooking, reading, video games, gambling, fun, whatever. Anything that is, it could be too serious a mood, whatever it is. Anything that is overwhelming your mind, it has the potential to shift your reality, so that you have an altered view of reality and an imbalanced view of the world, and your priorities are askew, wrong. So one must be aware of the importance of most things and their interrelatedness or interrelation, so that one can gauge and compare their importance and have an overall understanding and a more accurate view of life. So it's having a balanced view. In comparison, you could think of it like, as an example, you're talking about bills. Let's say you have some bills to pay, and then you prioritize what's the most important bill to pay. You pay that first, and you prioritize. You see, it's the same with life. You want to have an accurate view of life. Okay. So an example of reality taking over that is non-sexual, but nonetheless you'll see the idea how this works, is that let's say you're going about your day and you're doing various activities, whatever, fun or business or whatever it is, and at one point or at some point you become hungry. I'm looking at people eating pizza now. Great. So they become hungry, and depending on how hungry you are, let's say if it becomes quite overwhelming, then suddenly now your priority is the reality that is in your mind. Your world at that moment is, I've got to get something to eat. Something that strikes your fancy, nutrition, good tasting, You're not thinking about business, this, that, whatever. I've got to get something to eat. So you look at the road at that moment. The road which previously you were going to a business meeting or you were going shopping, and the road had a meaning of, a place for me to go to shopping, a place for me to go to the gym, a place for me to go meet my friend or whatever. That same road, all these roads now have an altered meaning, which is a route to get your food. Paper. You could be eating your food, and this paper could have an altered meaning of, I have no napkins. I'll use this to swap my face of this delicious spaghetti that is falling off my face. Or placemats. It might become placemats. You might put it in your suit and eat. So if anything drops, it's falling on this paper. So the paper which you were previously writing on has become a placemat. You're like, becomes a fly swatter. So that's what's happening with sex. How it's overwhelming, like a bee can sting, so you're like, you're quite aware. So it alters your state of understanding of the world, the reality at that moment. So that's why a lot of people behave so differently, get into odd behavior, and they are themselves shocked, and they don't know why. So this explains that. That's why it's important not to have pleasure as your overwhelming priority. It is never, I should say most, that's why it's important, so very important, to not have pleasure as the overwhelming priority. If you have anything as the overwhelming priority in your mind, and forget about having a balanced view of life, then your state of mind is imbalanced, and you will make incorrect decisions. So when you have pleasure as the overwhelming reality, and you have no choice but to have that happen to you, You see, what happens is that the state of attention that they put on your mind, the state of attention grabbing data that they put and bombard your mind with, that you're unfamiliar with right now, but you slowly become familiar with it. Bum, 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 bum. When you're exposed to it, bum, 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 it is affecting your reality powerfully, very, very powerfully, right? And so your mind is exposed to this stuff, shifting your reality dramatically. That's the. It's not up to you. It's not your choice. You're not making a choice there. It's being forced upon you without your conscious knowledge. Once your eye sees it and it's gone to your mind, now your reality has shifted. You don't know what's going on, but you're living in a different reality, and you're going to behave differently. You're going to think differently, and you shock yourself, and you're like, why am I doing this? Or why am I even thinking this? That's why it's important to not have pleasure become the topmost priority, to overrule your mind, to become the number one priority. It does so, it becomes the number one priority by force, by grabbing the attention of the senses, by this odd information that is presented. Odd, strange, overwhelming. Wow. And so, because the mind is not being given another choice, then mind has not been being given another choice. It's been given this. It can't think of other things. This is so powerful at that moment. I mean, it's really powerful and pleasureful. And pleasureful. And in that state of, in that realm, there is pleasure. A lot of it, of course, is illusory. It's powerful pleasure. Mind is gripped. Reality is established. So it's almost like a forced taking over of the mind. Very good. Insight number 10 is about plainly how sex is exaggerated, commonly exaggerated, meaning it's widespread, this practice in various mediums of communication. It's exaggerated. Sex is exaggerated, meaning it's not really shown to represent what it really is. It's exaggerated. It's lied. It's being lied about. Anyway, so here I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to give you two specific examples, not in the media. That's very plain for people to see. I'm going to give two examples from sexual programs having to do with sexual interaction, and one of them was there was this man interacting sexually with a female, quite intensely in this sexual position. The camera was facing the girl, and the man was visible as well. But the camera was clearly showing the face of the girl, and while she was being penetrated um, from behind, um, vaginally, let's say, what was happening was that the scene did not look good at all. The scene did not look exciting. It didn't look enjoyable. It just didn't have any. It was not pleasant at all. Not pleasant at all. It had no power to it. Anyway, now I looked at this. While I was looking at this, I noticed this because the girl, had no smile on her face. She was not smiling. Not only was she not smiling, it appeared that she may have been a little displeased. She's not smiling. Anyway, so the guy whispers very softly, ever so softly, in the hopes of the camera not picking up the voice, his voice, and he says, whisperingly, very softly, he says, "Smile for the camera." Soften that out. He whispers, he says, "Smile for the camera. Smile for the camera." Anyway, so when she looks at the camera and starts smiling, now the scene took on a whole different, it was like a different scene. Same thing going on, it's just that now it looked very pleasant and enjoyable, something one would want to engage in, because what they're projecting is pleasure, enjoyment, but she's faking it. That's one example. Another example is the camera is facing the lady in the sexual presentation, and so you can see her face. The man is again penetrating her vaginally. However, you cannot see his face or frontal area. You just see his back. But the woman, you can see her face. As this is being performed, it looks very interesting, and she had a lavish hairstyle with this is the hair. You go like this, another wave, another wave, another wave. Quite elaborate. One wave above the other. I don't know, probably 10 waves or more. You know, like this. All in that pattern. Okay. As she's being pumped, as one would say, pumped. The pressure is pushing her back. Eventually her hair flips back, falls behind her head. Suddenly, the scene appeared. It lost all its dazzle, razzle-dazzle, all its glitz. Suddenly it was a scene of a man simply pumping a woman, and it would have, in the book I give the example of something about a cooking show would have been more interesting than this. It was ridiculous. You know those machines you have that you pump and you get water out of the ground? You know, there's nothing exciting to that, is there? It's just getting water out. And so this, or eating. Eating is not a phenomenal thing as far as watching people eat. Yeah, okay, he's eating, or he's performing some task. It was just that. It had no glitz, no powerful, attractive nature. Anyway, so it was very dull, extremely dull. It was so visibly apparent that this action is absolutely blah, boring, as dull as you can get. You cannot get more dull than that. And now the woman at some point when this happened realized that her hair, her lavish hairstyle, had fallen behind her like this, behind. So the camera it was not visible to the camera anymore. So she was alarmed slightly and pulled the hair back. As soon as she pulled the hair back, so it was visible to the camera again, all the fantastic nature of this phenomenal, enjoyable experience, boom, the dazzle came, the glitz came back, and now the scene was oh so enjoyable. The magic was back. It was all in the hair. So watching that was allowed me to see how much of the magic behind sexual presentations is the idea of you interacting with a phenomenal, spectacular being. You know, how would you say it? Having a sexual interaction with an exotic being. Not your normal everyday thing, because that's what was so apparent. Once the hair was thrown to the back, you saw just two beings, and it's like hard to be impressed by that. There was no illusion anymore. Anyway, so yeah, so part of it has to do with the glamour, the excitement, and the enjoyment and pleasure of this sexual interaction is one of having interaction with an exotic being, something which you are not. This is the idea that is projected. I said, wow. It's an illusion. All right.